Enough is enough, Peter. This is a wonderful chance to make peace with the...
Days, what your parents told you to do, you did. You didn't argue.
Anything was better than the life I led. Anything. So I suppose I was very grateful that things had changed and I was my own mistress, more or less.
People had a code, a Victorian code, if you like, and they lived by it. I never wanted to kick over the traces. I didn't.
I do blame myself to a great extent, but I do think that if I hadn't made that promise to his mother, I would have broken it off before.
I was 27, I had no career, no training. I didn't want to live with Mother for the rest of my life. What else was there for me to do?
One day, my mother had a guest coming to stay with her, a friend of hers. I think they were either at school together or at college afterwards. I can't remember, but they were great friends, and she'd had a breakdown and came to stay with my parents. And I was at home at that time. I hadn't gone to London or with Grandpapa and Grandmama, and I was there. And her son used to come and visit. And I had no idea that he was enormously attracted to me. It didn't occur to me. I took no notice of him. I don't think I even liked him.
Loftus was reading the Wide World magazine in the corner, and I saw him eyeing me because Mother put me into this carriage alone. I was going up to Liverpool to meet my chaperone, because I was provided with a chaperone to go to Africa. And he asked me to lunch, and we got on well, and we were going to be on the same ship. And we had a very cheerful fortnight, but I fell in love with somebody else on the boat. And I didn't really think of Loftus at all. And 2 years later, he telegraphed me asking me to marry him. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't heard from him, he hadn't written to me, and I'd met him 2 years previously going to Africa.
One day my father said to me, "I want to see you in the study, dear." And I went in the study. That was nothing. I often went in the study. And he said, Edward, called him Edward, "Edward has asked for your hand in marriage." My hand in marriage? I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry anybody. Oh, he said, "You will. You are to marry him. It is a very, very good match. He's a nice man, he's a gentleman, he's an educated man, he's a very good family, and he's very well off. And I will be very happy to see you married to him. I can lay my head down when I've got to and die, knowing you are well looked after." I said, "I'm not going to marry him." She said, "You will, you know. I'm telling you, you are going to marry him."
Well, I said I'd meet him in London, and I sat up most of the night reading the Times upside down in one of those small sort of, not boarding houses, genteel little hotels in the West Cromwell Road. And he was very good looking, and he was a tennis champion of Brazil, singles. And he hardly ever spoke, and I thought he was, and I remembered him from the train and having lunch with him. And I thought, well, this is a way out. There were no alternatives for women. I had no education. What else was there for me to do?
Edith would come to my home and, on Sunday to tea and that sort of thing, and I'd go to hers to tea and that sort of thing. And we'd go to the pictures together and occasionally to the theatre, if we got a lot of money, but not often. But no, our life was not very exciting. I wouldn't get married while I was still in the Navy, so we were, to a very large extent for the first 5 years anyway, 6 years, more or less strangers to each other, because I was either in Hong Kong or somewhere like that, and she was in Birmingham.
He said, would you be allowed to come out with me? And he wanted to take me out for holiday Monday. He wanted me to go to Epping Forest. But in our house, things were so tight that every Monday morning when I wore my clothes to go to work, my best costume was taken to the pawn shop to pay the rent. You see, and I thought, well, how am I going to get to go out without my good costume? And how am I going to ask my mother if I can have my costume on Monday morning to go out, even if she'd let me go out with a boy? However, I talked to her and I said, well, I've met a very nice boy. I think you would like him. And I said, he lives fairly near, but said he has asked me to go out on Monday. He wants to take me to Epping Forest. She said, well, I don't like the sound of that. However, she did let me go, and she let me wear my costume, and she pawned it on the Tuesday.
As I walked into the room, the dance room, he was with another man, and he said to this man, who is she? And he knew me. And so, of course, I was introduced to him, and that is how I came to know him. And from then on, he called, and I went out with him. You know, we did the usual rounds that they did in those days, that is, dances and dinner dances and all this, but because he was very fond of the country, I knew that, and of course I loved it. So of course I thought, oh, this is, you know, we went out together. But all he had eyes for, would this be a good shooting ground or hunting ground? You know, we weren't compatible at all, because I can't bear seeing things hurt and shooting and all the rest of it. One of the things he did was he went fishing in the pond belonging to the farm. And he caught a fish, and he put it on the ground. And, you know, when it's first out of the water, it's fighting for its life. It wriggles. And I said to him, aren't you going to kill it or something? He said, no, it's all right. Well, I said, if you're not, I am. And I threw it back in the water so that it would live. And he was so wild, he pushed me back into the pond after the fish. But anyway, you see how things were getting very, very difficult indeed.
And we went for a country walk, and my parents said for a half an hour. And we went over a field, and there was a little stile, and we had to cross this stile, and I wouldn't do it until he turned round and put his back to me. I was so shy. I was so prim. I was so afraid I might show my ankle or a little bit of my petticoat that I would not cut across this very low stile until he turned round. And he said, all right, and he turned round, and I got over the stile, and I called out, I said, I'm over. And he came over, and he didn't seem shocked that I was, so shy and so timid about it. And then he looked at his watch. Oh, he said, Simon went home.
Not a boy I went out with ever tried anything on me at all, just kissing, and that was all. Sex in my home was never mentioned at all, and at my grammar school, that I never knew a girl to be pregnant. If she was, I probably wouldn't have known. I didn't know where babies came from when I was 17. And so that everything that happened after came as a bit of a shock, you see.
Girls are probably better instructed than men in that respect, because with the periods coming on, that sort of thing, they get a bit worried, that sort of thing. They go to mummy and talk to her, and you get the subject opens itself to discuss. But you don't get it with men.
One night he took me home and he wanted to make a fuss of me. And I said, you can stop that. So he said, well, what's the matter? He said, I've been going with a girl in Brighton. She let me do that. I said, right, you go back to the girl in Brighton. I'm going home. So I took myself home. I wasn't having anything like that. Well, I think I was a little bit concerned because I knew nothing. Nobody had told me anything. Mothers didn't seem to tell children anything in those days, so I'd not anything, no idea of the outside, what went on the outside. But I had my mother's experiences of having a baby every year, and the feeling was that if I let a man touch me, I'd end up like she was, and that's the last thing I wanted. I didn't want that.
I was beginning to cool off, and his mother became ill. She was only ill for 3 or 4 days, very ill, and they knew she wouldn't get better. She hadn't long to live, and he said, I want you to come up and see her. I went to see her, and she said to me, she said, I want you to promise me that you will marry Ted. Well, she must have had the inkling too, that I was cooling off, I'm sure. And she said this, and I couldn't say no. When a person's lying in bed like that, and you know they're not going to get better and they're dying, what are you to do? Anyway, I said, yes, I will. And of course, that was on my conscience all the time.
After the little incident, when I walked us home, we weren't going out together anymore. And then it was Christmas, and he sent me a little letter at Christmas, and he was very sorry. And could we go out again? Could he take me out again? Well, anyway, from Christmas on, until it was about May, one day, and I hope it was the 10th of May, I couldn't even remember the date. There was things that were very bad at home. I really had enough of it. And I went out the Saturday and I was in tears, and he said, you've been having a bad time again? And I said, yes. He said, right. He said, do you think we can make a go of it? You never said he loved me or whether would I marry him. All he said, do you think we can make a go of it? I said, yes, I suppose so.
And time went on. I was told I was going to a film with this Edward, and that he was going to propose to me, and I had to say yes. So the only time I'd been alone with him, we went to the theatre, not the theatre, the cinema, and we had a box. And in the interval, he went on his knees and he proposed to me. I don't think I said yes. I'm sure I didn't, but he slipped a ring on my finger. And he said, now we're engaged. And from that moment onwards, dear, he sent me flowers and chocolates and bits of this and bits of that. He paid me so much attention.
I gave him an option of getting out of it. The night before we married, I remember, I said, you know, it still isn't too late. If you don't want to go through with tomorrow, it's okay by me. And he said he did, so I had the governors of both islands as guests, Jersey and Guernsey, and I was lent a lovely house, and but one very strange thing, immediately after the wedding ceremony, Loftus was missing. I looked round and he should have been beside me, and he wasn't. And I never knew why.
For my wedding morning, I put on my best costume, which was brown. This was the one that I had to wait to get out of pawn if I could want to go anywhere. And I had a pair of white gloves, and I had a white hat, which possibly cost me 2 shillings. Might have not cost me as much as that, but I did know I had a white hat. And that was the wedding outfit. No flowers, no buttonholes, no bells, no anything, no organ, just the 4 people in the church. Just the service as usual, you know. And that was it.
We were married in a church. I don't even know which church. I can't remember.
Before I knew where I was, the marriage was arranged. I think I was in a daze. I don't think I really knew much about it. And we got married, and I was so ill with nerves, and I was so sick. And I had, during the reception, I don't know how I wasn't sick. And I had diarrhea too, which was horrible.
I knew I didn't love him the day I married him. Even when I was going through the ceremony in the church, I had the feeling I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this. It's wrong. Now, if you're going to start off on that premise, you're not going to be successful, really, are you?
I didn't really know whether I loved him or not. I never thought about it being a risk. I accepted it. And it was, well, I suppose really I was very unhappy at home. And anything was better than the life I led. Anything. I don't know now whether it's as well to know nothing or to know everything. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
How long had I known him? Well, only that the rail trip to Liverpool, and then the fortnight on the boat. And then I suppose about 3 weeks. And I never saw him really, you see, because we went out every evening, we danced and had a social time. So I married a stranger. But the whole thing was a sort of, I felt as though I were in a charade. See, we never talked to each other. You see, I don't think my generation ever did, really. We were on the surface of life. It was was disastrous, really. And then I went, as I say, to Brazil, and my mother came out, and he preferred mother to me.
My wedding night, it wasn't very successful because I didn't want to take my clothes off, but he took all his clothes off. I'd never seen a man like that before, naked, you see, and I felt a shock. I felt I wanted to get into the wardrobe and shut myself in it, so that it doesn't. Now I think he should have taken a different line. I mean, he knew I'd not been with a man at all before.
Very soon discovered that I'd got the wrong idea of marriage altogether. At least I got a very, very different idea to my wife's. There was no, what shall we say, sexual relationship at all. My wife was evidently not interested.
And he was very highly sexed, and I didn't know anything about sex. I had seen my brothers running about in the bathroom. I had seen they'd got a bag of tricks in front of them, but I thought nothing of it. And they used to say to me, "Aren't you lucky yours is tucked in?" I always remember my brothers saying to me, "Aren't you lucky yours is tucked in?" And when I found really what was happening, I mean, I didn't know that there was such a thing as erections. I didn't know that a man dug that awful thing into a woman. I had no idea of anything like that. And I was in a state of terror, in a state of physical agony, absolute agony. And I went through the tortures of hell. And I went through the tortures of hell the whole of my married life.
I hadn't had any dealings with men, you know, and that was all a surprise as to what happened. I thought, oh dear, wonder what this is all about. And it was a bit of a surprise. But anyway, I thought, oh well, take as it comes. It's something that happens, and there you are. We jogged along. We used to go out walking. And he used to, as I say, he told me all the things that had happened to him during the days, and I told him all the things that had happened to me, and I suppose we were great friends. I never knew where all the passionate love came in that I read about in the books that I was reading at that particular time. I never found any of that out, but we were companions and we were friends, never ever quarrelled about anything. We always, you know, asked each other whether that was all right. And I suppose we were considerate of each other. I know he was to me. He was always very, very kind and very, very nice.
He used to hit me because I wouldn't go to bed with him. Now you see, he had got his. He regarded me right from the beginning as his property, and so that I was there to do his bidding, so to speak. I'm not that sort of person, and so when I wouldn't go to bed with him, of course, this is what caused the trouble, when he started to knock me about a bit.
I knew nothing whatever about sex, nothing. I was completely ignorant. So I had no yardstick to compare it to. I mean, he was always correct, and but women fell in love with him because he was so good looking. And I had no weapons, dear. You have to have weapons if you're a female, and I didn't have any.
To really strain and struggle to have sex with somebody who doesn't want it is not conducive to pleasure. So I decided to really not try anymore. I suppose that would be about 6 or 7 years after we married. The marriage went on 43 years, and I never touched her. We lived together in this house and one before, and we just got along. We had our meals together. We changed to single beds, and we just, well, I suppose they put a face on. I had tried to discuss this matter of personal relationships, but I was always shut up at the very, very first word I suggested. We don't talk about that. And that was that. Can't make somebody listen if you don't want to.
I think he only knew what he had to do and dig into me, and I bled so badly, and I was so sore. I was wounded. I had wounds because I wasn't a big girl, and he was a big man. Well, at least he was big in that department, and very fierce, and a dreadful thing. I don't know how I didn't come to have children. That's the extraordinary thing, because usually a virgin's given a child bang pop right away, but it didn't happen to me. I'm very pleased about that.
There was one episode, he got out his gun and he said he was going to shoot me. Now, that was, I really didn't know, I felt, I can remember the feeling very well, So I said, well, go on and do it if you want to. And that was all I said. Then he put the gun down and he said, you won't be worth hanging for.
Well, I had thought about leaving, but in every case, I thought, who is going to be upset by this? My mother, my sisters, my brother, her parents, I suppose, but it wouldn't matter. Her side wouldn't have worried me anyway. But I didn't see any reason why I should upset a lot of people over something that was my fault. I married her in any case. So why go make everybody else unhappy about it?
And I said to my father, I must have a divorce. He said, divorce? Have you gone mad? Do you know what you're saying? I said, yes, I can't live like this. I said, I can't stand it. I said, married life is too terrible. I said, it's the most awful thing. I think it's shocking. And he said to me, what do you mean shocking? You got everything you want. I had a motor car by now. The motor cars came out, and I'd remembered the first motor car coming to Brighton, and it was my cousin who drove it from London to Brighton. And he said, you've got a motor car, you've got a maid, you've got servants, you've got a beautiful house. What more do you want? I said, to be left alone, I can't stand this. And he said, you'll get used to it. That's marriage. You'll get used to it. I said, I never will.
Anyhow, I went out one day, and I think it was a river, I don't know if it was a canal or a river. I sat on the bank, and I said to myself, I have to leave him. And what can I do? Because, well, in those days, a woman didn't leave her husband. They always thought there must be something wrong with her, to do a thing like that. Anyway, I thought it out. I thought, now, first of all, what can I do? I could commit suicide. Well, obviously I'm not going to do that. I love living. Secondly, I shall have to get a job. And to get a job, I've got to go somewhere or anything. My mother was dead against me leaving him, so I could not stay at home. So all I was left with was to get a job as soon as I could and keep myself. And that is what I did, and I left him. Now, he wouldn't give me any money at all, ever. So what I did, I knew he kept it. There was a set of drawers in the house. They were awfully nice. I'm sure they're probably old or anything, but he kept it locked so that I couldn't help myself. So when he was out, I got a screwdriver and I pushed it in this drawer and wriggled and wriggled and wriggled and forced, and I got it open. And I took all his money, every bit that was there. I felt it was owed to me, so that I was able to get away. I wanted the freedom I had before I married him, which he took away from me.
I could have been happier, quite obvious. But no, I enjoyed playing tennis, watching cricket. I used to go down to Edgbaston, watch matches down there. No, I enjoyed my life as much as I could under the circumstances. That was that.
Philippa was born at the end of the first year, and I had to bring her back to go to Great Ormond Street. And then I had a terrific struggle to make both ends meet. And then Loftus came back at the end of 2 years, and we had Bridget, and then he was killed. I don't think the marriage would have lasted, but we didn't have time to decide, really.
Last week, the 5th of June, would have been my 70th wedding anniversary. So when we were there, we were together for 62.5 years. So whether we loved each other, I never even thought about it. We agreed, we got on well together, we liked doing the same things, and we adored the children. What I wanted most from, when I realised that some people had a bedroom to themselves, my great aim in life was to have a bedroom of my own. And I never ever did have one. Not till my husband died, and then I didn't want it.
You should be happy in your life. It's too short to carry on without happiness. And I'm not a miserable person by any means. And, you know, I love laughing, I love living. And to be sort of tied down and held so that I couldn't be my real self, I couldn't bear it. They say you should marry opposites, but you shouldn't. You should marry people who like the same things as you do, because you're not going to get on if you don't like the same things.
Well, you liked me and I liked me, so that was all right, wasn't it?
But there's something beyond that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a very hard life. I suffered very, very, very much. And then he was unfortunately invalided with a poisoned heart, and he died. And I was free. I had met somebody again who my father wanted me to marry, and I was determined, once bitten, twice shy, and I was determined not to marry him. And by a great stroke of luck, he introduced me to my future husband. And after a very few months, I had a wonderful life because I married him and lived happy ever after. I had no trouble about the bed at all. He was a lover, and he was sweet, and he was gentle, and he taught me all about it, and he showed me all about it. And he was kind, and he was loving. I quite liked it after a time. I didn't mind it at all. In fact, I think if it didn't happen, I'd wonder what was the matter. I'm sure I would. But there you are. That's a different story. I didn't have that in my first marriage. No. I think I was much too young, and not having been told anything about it was a cruel thing to do.
Did you ever think about marrying again?
Never. Nobody's ever asked me. I'm not really the marrying sort. I couldn't bear ironing. I'd never marry a man who wanted his shirt produced, ready for him every day. That is an absolute grounds for divorce. I don't see why people can't dedicate the middle of their life to a marriage and then leave yourself free to make somebody else happy. Middle-aged men and women could have a lovely time in Cyprus together. Have a middle-aged romance.
We've got something between us that I didn't even know existed. That's what we've got. Because my life has been what it was before, it makes it 10 times better than ever. That's all. We really thoroughly enjoy our life together. And I'm 90, over. The urge is no longer about, but I still worship the ground she walks on.
How long have you been married?
14 years now. We're in the 50s. When we married, we thought we might be lucky if we got 4. So this is all overtime. Good overtime. Most of my colleagues when I worked, always, every time they went on a job, I had to look around and see how much overtime they could get. I never did. I hated overtime. But I like this.
We were